Damn, people. I can't leave my house for one Saturday without chaos ensuing. I felt like the Childish Gambino meme from the Community, where he brings over a pizza to an apartment and he walks in and everything's on fire. I came back from one weekend out of town, went to a nice music festival with my lovely lady, all happy, at peace, driving on home. I open up the door. I see James Franklin lying on the floor, Nico Iamaleava dancing circles around him. Madness. Welcome into the Spring Break College Football Show. Today is Tuesday, October 7th. This is your favorite ball knowers, favorite ball knowing show. Weird Tuesday episode. As I mentioned, the travels from this past weekend set us back just a little bit. I had to watch the games. I had to go back and see everything that I missed. Obviously kept up to date with things as much as I could while I was out of town, but Sunday, Monday, a lot of film review, a lot of looking back on things, a lot of gathering my thoughts on what I missed and what I watched. So we're here Tuesday. It is a 3-show week. We decided this last week. Our shows and our schedule was going to be based off the importance of the week that was ahead. I'm not sure yet if this is going to be a Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, but there's going to be 3 shows this week because there is a lot to discuss. We're at the midway point of the regular season. We have so many big games coming up in week 7. So we're in for a chaotic week here. But if you're here with me and you're here for the first time, first of all, thank you for joining the show. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment if you feel so inclined to. If you're listening, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, please leave a 5-star review, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone, share it with someone who maybe doesn't know ball. If you're here, you know ball because you're listening to the Ball Knowers' favorite ball knowing show. Share it with someone that needs to be educated on how to know ball. And we can grow this thing and create a community of ball knowers. Also head over to our socials. That's at Spring Blake CFB, both TikTok, Twitter, where you'll find stuff for this show, stuff that goes beyond this show. I ran out of stuff to put out yesterday, so I shared a couple of clips from my music festival. So if you enjoy that stuff on TikTok, go right ahead. You'll find some segments from this show. Twitter extends a little bit beyond that into a little bit more of whatever goes on in this demented brain on a daily basis. So yes, today's show, we're going to just go over all the major outcomes from week 6. And there is no other place to start than in the West Coast, in Pasadena, where Penn State did the unthinkable, losing to a desolate UCLA program. Final score in this one was 42-37. And everyone has shared similar thoughts. I will take it to the step beyond and say that this is the most inexcusable result that I can remember in my time as a college football fan, as someone who's covered it, as someone who enjoys the sport. This is the most inexcusable result. UCLA had zero reason to get up for this game. They start the season 0-4. They never led for a second in any of those 4 games. 2 losses to G5 opponents. They're being led by an interim head coach who was an assistant to the head coach. They have an offensive coordinator that had never called plays in his life before, and post-game finds out that there were multiple occasions where he forgot to put his headset down to call the play, including on one of the more pivotal downs for his offense. And despite all of that, from the very first drive, you could tell that UCLA had more fight in this game. They were winning the battles up front. They were breaking through weak tackle attempts offensively. There was just a clear attitude and edge that UCLA had that Penn State could not match, at least until late in the game, but then still had several issues that eventually led them to lose this game. The Bruins didn't punt until the middle of the third quarter. Nico Iamaleava deserves a ton of credit for the way he performed in this game, both throwing, especially on the ground, where I think he put, 128 yards, 3 touchdowns. Really, really impressive game for the Bruins in an environment that shouldn't have been that way. The Pasadena, that stadium was empty. There was nobody there. And by the end of that game, they walk away with the most unimaginable result we could have predicted. It's great for UCLA. The story is with Penn State. Blocking and tackling, two of the most rudimentary things in this sport, is what killed the Nittany Lions on Saturday. The inability by everyone on the Penn State offense to block, and that includes the offensive line, that includes the tailbacks, that includes the wide receivers on plays that went to the outside, was beyond infuriating when watching this game back. Draw plays, end arounds aren't being given enough time to develop. Aller is getting eaten up on plays where he should have more time in the pocket. And then you marry that ineffectiveness blocking with your play caller, Andy Kotelnicki, still drawing up plenty of those plays down the stretch, including a play where the game is on the line, 4th and 2, 37 seconds left. He does a long developing option play, end around, fake it to the wide receiver. Aller's going to take it up the gut. All of these slow developing plays that were not successful in the first quarter, the second, and the third, Kotelnicki is still drawing up for God knows what reason. He had no awareness over what was working in this game and what was not, and that marriage offensively led to their demise. And then defensively, the inability to contain the quarterback, wrap up ball carriers, was so alarming. As I mentioned, Nico Iamaleava, 128 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns. There were so many missed tackles by Penn State linebackers, defensive backs. It was like once Nico got past the front line, he had a field day. He was at least making 1, if not 2 guys miss. This wasn't a game where Penn State lost because they were outmatched talently. It wasn't a game where they lost because of injuries or travel, something which James Franklin went and blamed it on in the post-game press conference. This was a loss because your team didn't exhibit the 2 most rudimentary elements of football. And that falls on the shoulder of its head coach and shows to me a coach that is losing his voice or his control over the locker room. I left the game against Oregon, their loss, and said, this can go one of 2 ways. I thought the way that Ohio State responded to its loss to Michigan last year and just figured out what they were, abandoned what they weren't, and went on this amazing run that led them to a national championship. I was like, there are elements of that with Penn State. But I also wasn't sure because that loss was pretty alarming, and they don't, at the end of the day, have the same juice or the resume or the reputation that Ohio State does. I wasn't sure if Penn State was going to be able to just look in the mirror immediately and say, you know what, we figured out what was wrong. We're going to adjust. We're going to be fine moving forward, and this will carry us to more success than we could have imagined for. And instead, what they did was fell apart even further. I do not know what this means for the Nittany Lions the rest of this season, or what it could mean for the future beyond this program in 2025. They could wake up this weekend, light up Northwestern at home, which they should do, just as they should have done to UCLA last weekend. They could do that, find their way into a nice 9-3, 8-4 type season, and still finish in the top 4 of what is a really good Big Ten conference. But that is still a step back from where they were a season ago in the 1 year that needed to be a step forward. I am going to be extremely interested in seeing what decisions are made at the end of this season. There aren't going to be any that are made in the middle of the season. There's not a James Franklin firing that you're going to see by week 9, unless that you lose to Northwestern and things just continue to crumble. That's not going to happen. He's owed too much money. He's been there too long. He is still a good head coach, even if he's maybe not a great one. There are going to be changes that are made in this offseason. I don't know if it's coordinator-wise. I don't know if it's at the head coach. There's going to be a massive overhaul, and I'm very interested to see where this goes for Penn State because there are countless paths that it could take. Just such an alarming result. We're going to talk about a little bit later this week the difference between having a talented team and that being your identity versus having an actual football identity. We've seen it in 3 cases this season. Texas, we'll talk about in a bit. Penn State and Clemson. Just because you got a loaded roster doesn't mean that's your brand of football. That's all I'll say. We'll expand on that later this week. And then, for UCLA, how could you not be romantic about college football? Really happy for the fan base, for the players on this team, for the coaches that are in roles that they would have never possibly imagined they'd be in 5 weeks ago. No matter where this season goes for UCLA, this isn't the thing that sparks them into finishing off the year unblemished. And it's who knows where this program goes over the next 5 years, but you'll always be able to hang your hat back on this result and be like, remember that day when we took in Penn State and we had no reason to show an ounce of life. And we put up 42 points on what was supposed to be one of the best rosters in this sport, one of the favorites to win it all. And we sent them packing and into a tailspin. That's what's beautiful about this sport. So hats off to UCLA for an unbelievable result this weekend. And Penn State, man, oh man, things are really about to get interesting through the rest of this regular season, and especially once things come to an end in 2025. Still paranoid about our cameras. If you're new here, a couple episodes ago, our camera just shut off in between segments. So we're going to tie a bow on this game. We're going to go into some other results from the weekend. But before that, we're going to take a little break.
Balake. Where is Balake at?
So there's no denying that I take an L on Penn State. I picked them to be one of my 3 contenders to win the national title. A team that I picked to beat Oregon, a team that I thought would get off the mat. I didn't get that one right, but where I stuck to my guns and I kept swinging despite everybody telling me I was an idiot, and I finally got what I needed. Florida gets off the mat for the second year in a row now, in an impressive 29-22 victory over the Texas Longhorns. Backs against the wall, 1-3. This same team that responded in a win over LSU last year and rattled off 5 wins over their last 7 games, building momentum and taking a look and saying, wow, Florida, they really made the jump at the end of last year. Can't wait to see how they respond in 2025 and carry that momentum. Well, they lose to South Florida. They throw the ball away 5 times against LSU. They get dragged around by Miami. They go into their bye week. They come here with Texas, and I said, you know what? I know there is no reason to buy into these Gators anymore, but I had said all season, despite the schedule that they are faced with, there's going to be a couple results here where they pull off massive upsets that no one sees coming, and they go ahead and they beat Texas at home for their second win of the year, and something that maybe could steamroll them into a successful 2025 campaign. For the Gators, watching back this game, the offense finally utilized its speed on the perimeter to give balance to the offense for the first time all season. Heading into this game, it was a lot of 1st and 10. Let's jam it in between the tackles with Jaden Baugh. Okay, well, that was a 1-yard gain. Let's do it a second time. Maybe we'll get 2 yards. Oh, great. Now it's 3rd and 7. DJ Lagway, they know you're about to pass. Make something happen. That was what the offense looked like through the first 5 games of the regular season, the first 4 games of the regular season, This time around, you utilize the speed of this team, the perimeter of the football field, way more than you ever had through the first month. You got runs to Jaden Baugh outside the tackles. You got jet sweeps. You got short crosser routes that made life a little bit easier for Lagway. Getting the ball out to your speedier players and saying, hey, can you guys create a little bit after the catch? Everything that made this game a lot easier for the offense, kept him in 3rd and manageables, didn't put the weight of the world on DJ Lagway's shoulders, and as a result, you just got a far more effective and efficient offense. The Gators went 7 of 14 on 3rd down in this game. They were 6 of 30 in their 2 games against Miami and LSU the weeks prior. So you got way more of a balance effort, way more. You just saw the ball go through the hoop a lot more early on, which just is going to alleviate the pressure of the quarterback, the players, the defense, and just paves the way to an easier route to a victory. And then there is no denying that the season debut of Dallas Wilson, the talented 5-star freshman wideout, made all the difference in this game. He goes for 6 grabs, 111 yards, 2 scores. This was a dude that generated so much buzz in the offseason until a lower leg injury in camp kept him out through the remainder of fall camp, through the first 4 games of the regular season. We have plenty of history over the last couple of years to know the impact that a 5-star wideout that hits immediately has on a team. Jeremiah Smith last year for Ohio State, Ryan Williams at moments for Alabama last year, DeCorian Moore for Oregon this season. I can't remember his name. Malachi Toney for Miami this year. Like, these 5-star wideouts, when they hit, that is one of the biggest advantages to a new team heading into a regular season. Florida was without theirs. He was sidelined. And you saw him in the first game of his collegiate career go up against a really talented Texas secondary, and he just out-muscled them. He was bigger, he was more physical, he was breaking down guys after the catch, carrying dudes into the end zone. He looked special, dude, in his first collegiate game against a really tough SEC defense. And it goes just beyond giving your quarterback another top wide receiver. Having your number 1 guy out there makes everybody else's assignment easier. Now your number 2 goes up against the number 2 corner, your number 3 against the number 3. Everybody just has an easier assignment, and because of that, the offense operated a hell of a lot easier, and Vernell Brown and Sturdivant were more effective when they were called upon. So those 2 things alone for Florida, what they got out of their bye week, just a more simple offensive approach, a more talented wide receiver out in the football field, just made everything easier. You got the run support, you got the easy passing plays, a new stud to throw up to. That just allowed DJ Lagway to resemble the same Lagway that we saw last season. He finished the day 21 of 28, 298 yards and 2 scores. Did have a bad pick in the fourth quarter trying to throw the knockout punch on a deep shot down the field. But all in all, you couldn't watch that game and be like, hey, that's who we thought DJ Lagway was supposed to be. In this game, he averaged 10.6 yards per attempt. He was averaging 5.4 heading into this game. Across the first 4 games they played in the regular season, he doubled that against Texas. Again, this isn't just some tune-up against Kent State. This is the Texas defense that has been one of the best units in the sport through the first month of the regular season. You just start to get a feel like Florida is finding its gear. And for the Florida defense, they didn't have a perfect day. And they still have their flaws, the biggest one being they're without Caleb Banks the rest of the year. They're without Dijon Johnson, the very talented corner, for the rest of the season. They still have a couple of other guys that are banged up and may make a return in the middle parts of this regular season. And they did benefit from playing what is still a clunky Texas offense, but there are still plenty of enough talented dudes on that side of the field to where they don't need to play perfect football anymore if the offense is going to be able to provide some juice through the rest of the regular season. You know, they lost to LSU by 10 points. They should have lost to LSU by 40, the way that offense performed in that game. Miami kind of separated as the game went on, but early on, Florida did a really nice job trying to tighten up and keep that thing close defensively. If you are getting Florida scoring above 24 points in a game or getting 27 or 29 like they did this past week, the defense doesn't need to be Superman. It just has to be good enough, and they have the talent profile to be more than good enough. My last thing I'll say with Florida, they have sucked me in not since fall camp, since the end of last year's regular season. They have been my team that I've said, you know what, watch out. They're not going to be a playoff team. They're not going to be, finishing 10-2 because of the way their schedule works out. But they are going to be one of the best rosters you have to face on any given week. There is just too much talent at all of the important positions in football to make me think that this is just a one-game blip and they're going to fall back into irrelevancy for the rest of the regular season. Seeing their offense come to life in the way that they did against a really talented Texas defense makes me feel great about their ability to carry that momentum and do it to anyone else that's left on their schedule. That team that we watched on Saturday can head into Kyle Field this weekend and make Texas A&M tense, make them uncomfortable. I don't know if they'll get the win, but it won't be as easy as it was against Auburn and Mississippi State the last few weeks. It will not be. This team has the talent profile to beat a somewhat flawed Georgia team or Tennessee or Ole Miss before the regular season is up. They might not be a playoff team, but they're going to go around the SEC and just say, we're going to steal a win here, we're going to steal a win here, and we're just going to be the team that causes chaos in the SEC. There's already going to be enough of it. Florida's going to be the team that just slowly picks apart other teams and puts an end to their regular season. If they can... I don't think they're going to run the table. If they could run the table and finish the season at 9-3 and pluck apart some of these teams, you're going to be talking about what? One conference loss? Like, that's a Florida team that's still in the SEC title game if that happens. All I'm saying is I know that I have been riding this horse and it's easy for me to sit here after one win and take my victory lap. But just if you watch this team, they're one of the top 16 rosters in this sport when they're playing complementary football. They played it this past week. They can play it again. And if they do, they're going to start steamrolling some really impressive victories down in Gainesville, Florida. I didn't get my Florida cutoff delivered in enough time to wear it today. Maybe we'll be able to bring it back out if they beat up Texas A&M this weekend. But, man, dude, it's tough because you're going to sit here at the end of that regular season and be like, why did we have to lose to South Florida? Why did we have to lose that game? Because that could be something. If they're not in the SEC title game and they're one of those at-large teams, that's the worst loss. That'll be something that keeps them out of it, which is really frustrating. But they ain't done yet. It's October 7th when the show is coming out. A lot of football left. To flip things over to Texas for a second, this is obviously a tough stretch of football they're in right now. They're 0-2 against their Power 4 opponents. Everyone's sitting here saying the same things. The offense is a mess. Why does Arch not delivering on what you expected out of him? What has happened to Steve Sarkisian? I don't want to just sit here and be the Arch Manning defender for 15 minutes, but when I watched that game, and I watched a little bit of it live, and then I watched it back Sunday, one of those 2 days, I left thinking the same thing I thought Saturday. The weight of this loss is not on Arch Manning's shoulders. It just simply isn't. Sark is coddling Arch far too much, especially at the beginning of these games, and trying to force a brand of football that is not fitting their personnel at all. The biggest weakness of the Texas offense is their offensive line, yet they're still trying to play slow, patient football. And all it's done is lead to runs that are stuffed for short gains, and then putting the Longhorns in obvious third and long situations where, especially this last week, Florida's talented edge rushers could just tee off on the tackles and get to Arch Manning. How many times did we see Arch need to drift around the pocket or take off and run because the passing concepts took too long for his wideouts to get open, or they weren't able to create separation, or the offensive line couldn't hold up for more than a couple of seconds before he was under pressure? And then, when they speed things up, when they're down multiple scores, when they hit desperation mode, the offense finally has some juice. And we've seen this twice now. Go back to week 1. At what point did Texas's offense start to look alive? Well, they were down, I believe, 10 plus points and finally needed to start taking shots down the field. That is when they looked best in that game against Ohio State, when they were in desperation mode. And this offense finally found success down the stretch once it was down multiple scores and needed to switch up its approach. So I don't want to be sitting here and saying that Arch is this perfect prospect that's being let down by the worst offensive line in the league and one of the worst play callers. Like, no, Sark is one of the better coaches in this game, and Texas still has a lot of talent on that roster. But a lot of the issues this offense had this past Saturday had little to do with the quarterback. And when they did have to do with the quarterback, I can excuse it from a first-year starter playing his first road SEC game. You're down multiple scores in the fourth quarter. You're going to have to start forcing the football down the field, take chances to cut the deficit. Turnovers are going to happen in those situations, and he had 2 of them. Clock management, situational awareness, especially at the end, was rough. But again, dealing with a young quarterback, limited starting experience in a tough SEC road environment. I can understand getting a little lost in those circumstances. He does have to play better. There's still, areas of growth for him. He does need to be a little bit more accurate on short to intermediate throws, better with the situational awareness stuff. But the way that this offensive line is played, how incapable his playmakers are at creating after the catch or creating separation, and because of how Sark seems to be still coddling him through 5 weeks of the regular season, I just don't sit here being like, yeah, Texas has an arch problem. Texas has an offensive line problem, and it has an identity problem, I guess is what I'd say. They're trying to be something they're not right now, and because of that, they're finding themselves in this position where they're 0-2 against Power 4 opponents, and they look like a team that isn't going to be competing for an SEC title. Now, that being said, we've seen plenty of teams respond in positive ways after games like this. We just saw Florida respond in a really nice way. We've seen Alabama, who we'll talk about in a little bit, respond in a big way. The Longhorns have a really important month coming up. October is going to be huge for where this team goes toward the end of the regular season. Game against Oklahoma this weekend is going to get all the attention. If Mateer is out, and right before we were recording this, it's like, Mateer might be playing. If he's out, I think they're capable of squeezing out a low-scoring type win, kind of like how Ohio State did to them in week 1. I think that's possible. But the Sooner defense is also no joke and could give this Texas offensive front the same exact fits that they were faced against Florida. So that's not a gimme. Certainly not a gimme, and definitely not if Mateer is back. Finding offensive momentum beyond this game, stretching along some strong performances against Kentucky and Mississippi State through the rest of October is going to be pivotal for this team if they want to stay in the SEC picture. Because you can't enter those games in November and beyond against Vanderbilt, Georgia, Texas A&M with this same approach and this same, lack of offensive identity, or at least one that fits your players. Sark has to embrace what this offense actually is, speed up his approach, get the ball out quicker, stretch the ball down the field, take more shots, and not try and win in a phone booth if they want this team to reach their highest ceiling compared to what this group of players is. Because this was a team that was picked to win the SEC. They're one of the favorites to win the national championship. And the brand of football they're trying to play on offense is one that is not sustainable through the rest of this regular season. And I hope that this game against Florida and losing to a team that had been struggling for so long flips a switch where things go stylistically on the offensive side of the football. So that's 2 games down. We got 2 more to go. Again, paranoid about the camera. We're just going to take a quick timeout. We'll be back in a couple of seconds.
My name's Blake.
All right, so we've hit on the Big Ten. We just went to the SEC. We're going to go back to the SEC to close out the show, but we're going to move to the ACC right now, where Miami, man, they continue to look like the most impressive team I have seen all season, dragging around Florida State to a very deceptive final score of 28-22. Miami, and when I say most impressive, I don't mean the most talented team. I do think that they are one of the most talented teams. I think there are a couple that maybe have a little bit of a talent edge at certain positions. But what Miami has done that a lot of other teams have struggled to do, Clemson, Penn State, Texas to a certain extent, is they have done a remarkable job at marrying talent with a unified identity on both sides of the ball. I think this team understands who they are better than anyone else does in this sport right now, which is why they've done nothing but stack impressive wins against Notre Dame, Florida, and now Florida State. The entire Miami roster embodies the size and physicality and demeanor that they have in the trenches. It's almost like the playmakers, the defensive backs, the linebackers, they know that they've got the baddest bodyguards in the country up front. So they're like the tiny friend who's really cocky that he's got a 6'5", 300-pound best buddy protecting him at the bar. He can talk a little shit because he knows that this guy will clock him out if anybody tries to give him business. It's almost like the skill players are just embodying the persona of the guys up front because Top to bottom, they play such a physically imposing style of football. And like I said, it's a team that just really gets who they are and doesn't shy away from it. Corey Heatherman, we've said it however many weeks now, he has been one of the best hires made this past offseason. The work that he has done improving the secondary of this team, which is in hand, unlocked the front seven even more, has been remarkable. And Shannon Dawson deserves a ton of credit because he is so dialed in as a play caller on offense. Now for Miami, this game specifically, it's a little bit funny of a box score to look at because the Canes were held to under 100 rushing yards on the day despite having a sizable advantage up front on the offense and one of the best run games coming into the weekend. But as I've said with Miami, them understanding who they are, they didn't just get stuffed early on in the game and decide to abandon who they are. You know, they ran the ball 31 times on Saturday. And you're like, oh, well, that doesn't sound all too efficient. Why'd they only throw the ball 27 times if they were far more efficient that way? It's because they know that they are a team that runs between the tackles, that wins with physicality, and it doesn't matter if you're getting 3 yards a carry or less. It's death by 100 paper cuts, and slowly but surely you're just going to carve away opportunities and make that defense tired. You have to keep defenses honest in this sport. It's the reason that we watched Florida struggle for a month straight because they weren't establishing the run or committing to it beyond the first couple of drives. It's the reason LSU hasn't looked much of anything on offense this entire regular season. They do not stay committed to the run. It's the same reason that Alabama lost to this very Florida State team in week 1 because they abandoned the run after the first couple of drives. The balance and support that this Miami offense is providing Carson Beck with is just making things so incredibly easy for him. It's the play action passes where he's hitting guys deep down the field, RPOs. He is delivering on every moment that the Canes are asking him to deliver on. Surgical again for Florida State against Florida State's defense. So very impressed with the offense. It's more of the same. You know, this was one of those games where the impressive part is that they're here at 5-0 with the meat of their schedule done. And that's the impressive part, that they've gotten through it and have looked as good as they had. But if you had to look forward to the rest of the season, you know, they're on a path that should just be a walk into an ACC title game, that should be a walk into the college football playoffs, one of the easier opportunities in the sport right now to make it to those points. I don't think anybody else has an easier path than Florida State because than Miami. Than Miami. No one has an easier path right now than Miami because the remaining schedule, they have 2 games coming up at home against Louisville, frisky team, but nothing too special, and Stanford. They have a tough road trip to SMU. I don't view SMU in the same tier of Miami at this moment. I don't think anybody else in the ACC really is, but they're Florida State light, so you could still get maybe a tough game where you still drag them around and the score looks a little bit deceptive. So you've got Louisville, Stanford, a road trip to SMU, 2 more home games against Syracuse and NC State. I'll take the Canes in both of those. And then the final 2 road trips, Virginia Tech and Pittsburgh. Tough road environments, but at the end of the regular season, I would still feel really good about the Canes at that point. The only issue I'd have for them, because I do think that this path is super easy, I think they have a really nice position here to walk into the postseason. You have to do such a good job at not becoming complacent. I don't think that that's something this team will do given their mentality and the demeanor that they bring to a football field. This doesn't seem to be like this high octane, throw the ball 50 times. So yeah, we're just going to keep chucking it and then one game comes around where you don't hit those. Now, this is a team that wins by bullying you, and I think they get a little bit of pleasure out of that. So I think they're going to be fine keeping that, what's the word that I'm looking for? Keeping that complacency aside, but you do have the tough part of your regular season done, and it's October 7th. It's the first week of October. Your tough games are done. Can you keep that same energy for 2 more months? That's the only concern that I'd have with Miami. A lot of teams get to that point where they've like, oh, we're coasting now. And then all of a sudden they go to a road game in Blacksburg, Virginia, and oh shit, how did we lose that one? Did it happen to Miami last year? I think it did. Or is that someone else? I can't remember. I'm just trying to say, Miami is one of the stories of the season. No team has been more impressive to me. As we move through the rest of the regular season, I just don't want to see them become complacent. Because that's the only thing that should be hurting Miami between now and the end of the regular season. And when we talked about this game last week, or we talked about Florida State in general this season, I have never really spent a ton of time on them. My talking points around Florida State have always been the same. I thought heading into the season, they were one of the more improved teams in the country because of the portal additions, the coordinator hires. I thought they were going to take a sizable jump. But that doesn't mean I expected them to win every game. I still thought at times this was going to be a flawed football team, despite being eons better than the 2-10 one that we watched last season. Florida State did show some nice fight in the early parts of this game, especially in the first quarter. Got some big chunk plays, a really nice opening drive, a couple of nice plays on the drives that came after. But once the deficit began to grow, the Seminoles just got antsy on offense, and that's when the turnovers started to roll in, and that's kind of Castellanos in a nutshell. Castellanos, his highs are extremely high, and I thought, trying to get this game close in the fourth quarter, he made some really impressive throws, some nice runs, like he did a good job getting the game close. But he was also the reason they fell into that deficit in the first place. Really poor decisions at times, bad interceptions, bad sacks taken. And that's not all his fault because he was under pressure the entire day. And he got no support from the ground game. And a lot of that has to do with Miami's defensive front just being a different breed in this sport right now. But this is why Florida State has a limited ceiling to me, is because Castellanos, when he's on, he's on. When he's off, it's going to lose you some games. And we've seen that a couple weeks in a row now. So 2 conference losses for Florida State to put this team down to 8th in odds to win the ACC, tied with Clemson right now. I still think they'll be one of those teams that finish the regular season in the top half of the standings. I think I picked them to finish 4th or 5th in the conference in the preseason. But it's just asking a lot for this team to go from 2-10, totally new roster, new coaches, and all of a sudden be playing for an ACC title game. I don't think that was ever clearly in the picture for them, despite being, like I said, I'll say it one more time, one of the more improved teams we've seen in the country, and hopefully is a nice stepping stone for what's to come in 2026 from this team. I'm going to trust my gut here. That one wasn't as long of a segment. I'm going to trust that the camera is still on. I'm lying. I'm going to check it one more time because I'd be mad if we missed something here and I couldn't go back and recover for it. So one more break. We're going to hit on Alabama Vandy, and then we'll get the hell on out of here.
Blake. What?
Camera's still on, so let's keep this thing rolling. We do need to touch on Alabama versus Vandy before we finish up today's show. A game where Kalen DeBoer exercised his demons, took down the Commodores by a final score of 30-14. Like I said with the Florida State-Miami score, this one in the final box is a little misleading because Alabama did tack on a touchdown with 17 seconds left, but they were still in full control of this game, held Vandy scoreless over the final 31 minutes of the game. It was a little bit of a jump scare early on, I'll give you that. Bama tosses its first turnover of the season, I think on the very first drive that they had. And then Cedric Alexander rips off a 65-yard touchdown run, and you're like, uh-oh, we've seen this before. But the Tide responded well in this one, put their hands around the throat of the game, and made it a total reversal of the game or result that we saw when these teams faced off in 2024. On Saturday, Alabama won the time of possession battle by 15 minutes, after losing it by 24 the season prior. Last year, Vandy was 12 of 18 on third down. Alabama's defense held them to 5 of 11 this year. Alabama was 3 for 7 on third downs last year, slightly better percentage-wise at 7 of 15 this season. Alabama cut their penalties and turnovers in half from where they were a year ago, while forcing Vandy to turn over the ball 3 times after failing to record one all of last season. Total reversal from where you got. Alabama dictated the pace, the style of this game, and really bottled up Vandy more and more as the game went on to make the difference in this one. Jam Miller went over 100 yards on the ground for the Tide. The first time a running back has done so under Kalen DeBoer. Another one of those games, numbers where you're just like, how has DeBoer not had a 100-yard rusher at Alabama? He's 15-plus games into it. So you start to get the feeling because of that and because of the growth that we've seen this offense make that there's more gears that they're going to continue to find as the season goes on. Over the last month, we've gotten the prolific passing game with one of the best wide receiver rooms in the nation, a quarterback that's in full control of the offense. Now you're getting the improved run play from Jam Miller and his return, a better offensive line, play from the offensive line in both run support and pass protection. And you're also getting that sprinkle of unpredictability whenever Ryan Grubb feels like he needs to just go deep into his bag to pull out something special. There is just a new level of confidence that I'm gaining in this Alabama offense as each week passes and makes me feel really good about where this team is headed. There's no team in the SEC to me that has separated itself from the rest, but the steady growth that I'm seeing from this team makes me feel like Alabama is the team to beat when it's all said and done, which is a scary thought because they have a really fun game coming up against a hot Mizzou team that has all the momentum in the world, yet there's like a sprinkle of like, is that real? We're about to find out. And then I think the other story to just touch on for Alabama for a second was their defense, which for the first time since Kalen DeBoer has taken things over, held a mobile quarterback in check. Diego Pavia really didn't have that much of an impact on the ground. He fumbled in the red zone. Vanderbilt didn't record a run in the fourth quarter. I think they had 5 carries for almost 100 yards in the first quarter, and then through the rest of the way did nothing on the ground. Alabama seemed to finally wake up and get that, which has been their issue since taking over. Mobile quarterbacks destroyed this team, and they still have a few more they have to face on the schedule. So, Bo Pribula this week, it'll be really interesting to see if that was just a one-time thing or if it's going to be the tone of this defense moving forward. But it was a really impressive effort, clamping up after those first couple of Vanderbilt drives and doing a nice job in the second half of just keeping them out of not just the red zone, but the end zone, keeping them away from scoring. Really made things a little bit easier to just handle this game without it getting too tense later on. And then for Vandy, few teams in the country have a better understanding and awareness of who they are as a football team. This reminds me a little bit of Miami, where I'm like, Miami just knows who they are and they stick to it. And because of, the talent that they have that matches it, it just goes beyond that. Vanderbilt is like that without the talent profile. And what you get from that is you'll always be competitive in games. You stayed competitive with Alabama despite a massive talent discrepancy. You'll still be competitive with the teams you have on your schedule the rest of the way. But when there are certain teams that have a significant edge in talent, they'll be able to separate from you when it's all said and done. So I don't view this as like, Vandy's back to the gutter. No, they're going to be competitive for the rest of the season. It's just, at the end of the day, no matter how much of an identity you have, if the other team is just littered with more talent and has somewhat of an identity, they're going to be able to squeak by you, which is why Alabama won this year as opposed to the loss they had this year. Alabama's identity is far more sturdy as a football team on both sides of the field in 2025 than it ever was in 2024. So yeah, it's just, you're not going to catch teams off by surprise anymore because you had an impressive season last year and you continued it into the early parts of this year. And then teams with more talent they're going to be able to get it done when it's all said and done. So still a really fun season, still really nice development for Vandy. I hope it's something that, you still stack a few more impressive wins. There's going to be games here that I think you've got LSU in a couple of weeks. That's a team you 100% could beat. Coming into your home, they don't have any identity. That's one of those situations where I'm like, it makes sense for Vandy to pull off the upset. That'll be a fun one to talk about in a couple of weeks. We've got so much going on at the Spring Break College Football Show. Tomorrow or Thursday, we're going to have a little bit of a mid-season check-in. We're going to take a look at, okay, do I want to update, any playoff stuff, national championship stuff? We're going to start, previewing some of the biggest games of the week. We have the Red River Shootout. John Mateer might be back 17 days after hand surgery. So we got that one. We've got Bama, Mizzou. We've got Indiana, Oregon. There are so many games, which is why it's a 3-show week. So we'll be back twice more later this week. Thank you guys for your support. Again, like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe if you're on Spotify, Apple, 5-star review. Follow the socials at Spring Blake CFB. I love you. I appreciate you. And I'll talk to you in a few days. I'll talk to you in a few days. Peace.